I kind of have to
I'm
pee
having fun
too,
with.
to be honest with you. That's not fun.
Do you
I
want to
guess
go
we'll have to
first
take
this time?
turns. I guess I could.
We'll let you go first. I'll talk to the people because I need to explain to them how Zach snubbed you on your birthday.
Okay, great. Get that out of the way.
Because he's a drunk. He was out drinking,
Oh no.
partying, forgot
That's a
about all his
bad look.
friends.
That's a
Yeah,
bad
and
look.
like drinking his blue drink with the whoop cream
Mm.
on it.
Yeah.
Ahoy again, Mandy Binder,
All right.
Binder Binder.
Bye.
But what's up, Grayson? How are you? Janet's well, let's be honest, Janet's going poop. That's what's happening. And that's fine. Everybody does it. So let's not judge. Everybody, this is part of nature. Hey Kathy, hey Susan again, Valerie. Hey guys. We're about to have us a spicy episode. And we're saying Zach, this is like the worst episode ever for Zach to be missing because you know how much Zach is, like the rest of us, obsessed with this Delphi case. But he is on assignment today, sadly, for Zach. Oh, he wasn't here last week for the Super Bowl halftime show talk, and he's missing Delphi this week. It's a bad couple of weeks to be Zach. And yes, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, I am rambling, but that's because Janet's going to the bathroom and I have to fill the airwaves. So you guys in the chat should be talking more than just saying ahoy and hello. Say something important. Ooh, Carissa's excited for the spice. That's good. Go nuts, Bob. I need a good rant. Valerie, it's too bad. I don't know if you are or not, a patron, but if you are, even if you're not, it's worth the cost of admission just to hear the insane rant that I went on during the pregame show that comes out on Wednesdays today. See, Jan's about to put the headphones back on. Look at that. She's fixing her hair over the headphones. Interesting. I thought you would tuck the hair back behind the ears for the headphones.
I go back and forth.
I saw you make a move to actually put your hair between your ear and the headphones. That was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. So this doesn't make a difference that much either way, but for some reason sometimes I'm in the mood to have it. It kind of
Is it the way
how
it
can I
looks type of
explain?
thing? Is that why you pull it there because of the way it looks?
I don't know that it looks different enough for it to be that. It's just a comfort thing, but I'm not sure.
It's padding. Now I want
It
long
is
hair.
extra padding. It is extra padding.
Yeah, I want
Somehow
long hair now.
it kind of feels like a smoother transition from
I would
headphone
really
to
like where
non-headphone.
we have monitor headphones that I bought for Mike when he was having his ear issues.
Uh-huh.
They were very expensive. They were like $600 headphones, but they're
Oh.
the open back ones. They're like mesh, so like it's breathable, like for your
Oh.
ears. But I
I
feel
don't
like
think
I
I've ever
can't.
worn those.
Oh, I put them on every once in a while when I'm editing. Really, really comfortable. They're oversized too, so they're not hitting your
Hmm.
ear. Really soft
Yeah.
padding. They're mesh, so the air flows through.
Hmm.
But I never wear them recording because of that open mesh. I'm afraid that the microphone will pick up feedback because you
Oh,
get like
maybe.
when he would be over editing, I could hear what he was editing through them
Yeah.
because they're not like sealed up. Oh, well, I chatted for quite a bit, told everybody what you were doing while you were gone, so
Great.
everybody was clear. So
It
now
took
maybe
me a
you.
minute because if I'm honest, I went in there and I was like, nobody has cleaned this toilet in a while. It's not dirty. It's just that ring of like the water ring. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. So you
And
scrubbed the
I just
toilet.
looked at it and I was like, God damn it. And so I just sprayed some cleaner in there. And then I was like, I'm gonna let that sit and then I'm gonna clean the toilet after this. That's a real no one will do it if I don't do it scenario.
Right, makes
Like,
sense.
even though other people have been out here while
Right,
I
well,
was
you know what?
gone.
Keep this conversation going with the chat
Okay, great.
while I go make sure I don't have any rings on my toilet. I'll be right back.
Fantastic, fantastic. You can tell how old a toilet is by counting those rings. Yeah, that's the kind of silence that deserves. Not that I could or would hear laughter coming from anyone, but even if I could, I know there wouldn't be any, and that's okay, Um, you were up watching the stream last night and gave up about the same time Allie did, finished this morning. Modest stream? I didn't Man, I don't get any alerts for streams. But I'm supposed to, like, I've signed up for it. I'm gonna assume that's what you're talking about, Susan, but I also know that once the delay catches up, you will tell me exactly what it was. Um, Maybe they were talking about all the stuff that is in the ether, like, in conversation about Delphi. That's my fairly educated guess. It doesn't make me that smart to put 2 and 2 together. And Jennifer is now making it even more certain that that is what you guys are talking about, since you said Baldwin is fantastic. That sounds like it's probably Andy Baldwin. Yeah. Pensacola. I'm sure there's stuff about it that's not great, but I really enjoyed the White Sand Beach. Really enjoyed the peeps I met. Had some great pizza. Let me tell you, my favorite pizza flavors are, and this is perhaps controversial because I recognize that it is got some sweetness to it, like the way people freak out about the pineapple thing. Pineapple is not for me on a pizza necessarily, but I don't really
My
mind it.
favorite.
I know you really like it. I love like when there's fig, like some fig jam or some fig preserves and like prosciutto and arugula and like
That sounds
a couple of
really
different
good.
cheeses and like a little salt and pepper. It's so good. Goat cheese, you can put some honey goat cheese on there or just regular goat
I was
cheese.
gonna say the
It's damn good. Oh,
fig with goat cheese
and
is
arugula.
mm,
That's like, oh, an
yeah.
amazing set of flavors right there.
I mean, it's barely a
Real,
pizza
real
at that
good.
point, but the
It's barely
flavor
pizza. You can call, I think people call that, they revert it into a flatbread. They're like, it's a flatbread. I'm like, what's the
yeah,
difference? They're like, I don't know, but it's a flatbread.
yeah, I would dig on
It's
that.
really good. I
My
had
thing with
that.
the
I
pineapple
got a whole pizza for myself when I was in Pensacola. I had no one to eat it with, so I just
yeah,
like made it work last over 3 days.
right. Well, my thing with pineapple is that I love sweet and spicy, sweet and salty mixed
Mhm.
together. So I like to
I like
get
sweet and salty too,
a
yeah.
pizza that has like a lot of pepperoni and sausage and like just very like salty spiciness,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
throw some pineapple on top of it to kind of collide with that. And lately, it's been the hot honey drizzle over the top of it. Have you never had hot honey drizzle over a pizza?
I
Erica
haven't, but I
introduced me.
know I would love it.
Oh
Oh,
my
you know what
god.
I had? It was maple syrup. A little maple syrup
Okay,
drizzle over a
buddy.
pizza that had, like, ham on it. It was real fucking good.
I bet it would be.
It
Although
was
I don't
like
know. I get
pancake, it was like chicken and waffles or like, you know what I mean? It was
yeah.
like that sort
I bet
of,
it would be good. I bet it would be
it
good. I get
wasn't,
it.
you don't have to do much. It's just a drizzle, you know what I'm saying? It's like a
Yeah, that's what the hot honey
like a
is, and that
thin little drizzle.
the hot honey with there's something Erica introduced me to this summer. We ordered a pizza one day, and she also likes pineapple on a pizza, so we were like in heaven. Like we ordered like sausage, pepperoni, and pineapple, and then she's
Mhm.
like, "Let's get hot honey drizzle over the top of it." And
Ooh,
I was like,
ooh.
"What? That doesn't even make any sense to me." But it
Uh-huh.
adds another layer of sweetness, but also a layer of spiciness.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Like actually, for
I have
my
some
birthday,
hot, that
Becky
you
got me
just
a little
reminded me
bottle
that
of
I
it.
have some hot honey. I have spicy honey in my cabinet that I never remember I have, and there's never like, it's rare that there would be an occasion where you're like, "You know what this needs? Spicy honey." Like, it's not, it doesn't ever occur to me, but every time I look it in the cupboard, I'm like, "Oh, I should figure out something to do with that." Like, I like it.
Yeah, Becky got me a bottle of it for, my birthday, and it was
Yeah.
or for Chris I think she put in my stocking at Christmas or something. It's like Mike's Hot Honey or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I might have that.
but we use it so, like, we get a lot of, we get Quest protein pizzas a lot. They're
Mhm.
like frozen pizzas, but they're, like, super high protein, low in
Oh,
calorie, you know?
yeah.
And, yeah, we'll throw those in the oven, and we'll split it and then put a little bit of little drizzle of the hot honey on there. Mm,
Interesting.
and yes.
Like, Quest is the same thing as that as the Quest protein bars.
Yeah, yeah, they all
Gotcha.
kind do all kinds of protein stuff. But
Gotcha, gotcha.
better yet from Quest is their protein chips. I don't which those
Oh.
are because you're gluten free, so, yeah, they
They
taste
should
like a
be. I bet they are.
yeah, they
Yeah.
are. They
Yeah.
taste like a Dorito, but they're like the little bag of chips is like 140 calories and like 20 grams of protein.
Yeah.
Really yummy.
That
Extra
sounds
yummy.
good. I'm kind of into, there's these I don't know if they're really that, it's one of those things where like I've very purposefully not really read the ingredients, like not really looked to see if they're good for you because I'm sure they're not. But they're these like egg white chips that are like, it's like egg whites and like chicken protein or
Mm,
something, and then it's a salt and vinegar version, but they also have like chicken and waffles version. They have like a hot like ranch, but it's definitely, it's grain free. It's just like egg whites and then a couple of other things, including I think chicken. But
yeah. I
they're really good. But again, I could look. I haven't looked to be like, oh, this is actually garbage.
Yeah, Monica suggested the legendary chips, which she likes better than the Quest. I don't. We've had those. They're all right. They're a little puffy for me. I think they're like puffed corn, kind of the way they make the chips. It's not for me. I could see how people like them,
This is not that, but yeah.
but we do. Legendary makes protein Pop Tarts.
Whoa.
Yeah, and we have those. They don't taste like
That
a Pop
can't
Tart.
be gluten-free.
No, I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's not. And because
What if
they're
it is?
very much there's very little of like the filling. It doesn't taste like a Pop Tart. They're not crunchy like a Pop Tart, but it is a nice little snack.
Yeah.
But we got so much to
Wild.
talk
That's
about.
exactly right, Susan. Yes.
Wow, I have heard of
Wild.
those. I just
They're
ordered
good.
ramen noodles. Instagram ad got me last night. Imi, IMMI maybe ramen noodles, but it's like the regular,
Mhm.
like the same, like the little block of ramen
Yeah,
noodles,
huh?
but they are like way high protein and low carb. Like they're like
Hmm.
I don't know, like a block of them is like 300 calories and like I think 20 grams of protein and I don't know, like 4 net carbs. It's like also 19 grams of fiber, which you need a high protein diet like I do. You need the
Right.
fiber.
Yeah.
Um, but so I was like, oh, but I won't order anything from the Instagram shop because I just feel like I'm gonna get scammed. So then I go find them on the actual website and order them. So
Right.
got some of them on the way.
I'm
Way to
glad
go.
that everyone's getting into the wilds with me. They are good.
I have to check them
The
out.
salt and vinegar, yum. And the chicken and
Um,
waffle. The chicken and waffle tastes too good.
sweet and
Like,
salty.
danger, danger.
Sweet and salty.
Exactly.
All right, we need to start the show because we got so
Yep.
much to talk about.
Y'all.
I got to figure out how we're gonna when we get going. Because I know we got a bunch of listener questions, but I also like I've read a bunch of stuff and I listened to the murder sheets talk about the reply from the state on this, and I took some notes on that. So I guess we'll have to
Cool.
play it by ear. My guess is
Okay.
you and I will just have a bit of a lengthy discussion at the beginning, then we'll get into the listener questions. But for
Okay,
now,
cool.
I'm going to end this live stream or this not this live stream. I'm going to end this
Pregame,
episode
pregame.
for the pre-gamers. So pre-gamers, we love you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, pregamers.
Hope you enjoyed my epic rant.
That's
Goodbye.
a good one. Goodbye.
Oh, damn it. I hit stop before you did your
That's
beautiful
too
goodbye.
bad.
Made fun of my voice cracking. I'm finally going through puberty.
Congratulations.
And are we ready to hit
Sorry, what
record?
is the don't hate me, but what is
10.
the
10. It's on top of your screen. Look at that. Look, it says follow up season 16, episode 10 to help you remember.
where does it say that?
Left side of your screen, right next to the duck. Top.
You're so right.
Yep, there she is.
All of this, yeah. Great. Okay.
Let me know when you're ready to hit record.
I'm ready to hit record.
Let's do it.
Recording.
Recording. 1, 2, 3.
Great.
All right. You get to be Zach again this week.
Ahoy, friends. You are listening to the Friday follow-up for season 16, episode 10, where Bob had Bob Mata back on the podcast to talk about all the recent developments with the Delphi case. And once again, super interesting conversation. There were a few things that Bob Mata mentioned to you, Bob Ruff, that you definitely were kind of processing in the moment and having some, had a lot of feedback and had a lot of like, oh, for me, this episode included a lot of like, you would want to go follow up elsewhere on blank. Do you know what I'm saying? There was a
Right.
lot of like, I heard this or I read this or from what I understand, but it to me it begged a lot for a lot of like, okay, cool. Well, let's like find out more about all of this.
Yeah, and that's definitely what it was for me. Like you said, I think you described it exactly right. I was processing things like as they were happening because I hadn't had
Yeah.
a chance to read through a lot of this stuff. So as Bob was explaining to it, the couple things that got me, as you heard, I'm wondering if anybody in the chat chimes in on this. I'm curious if anybody did the homework I assigned, which was to go look up thermal drone deer recovery to see
Right.
how those things work. I don't know. So chime in the chat if you actually did that. But that was it. When I found out they did that, that was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
But
How
are we
did they?
sure they did that? And by
I
the way,
don't know.
I got so into describing that. I just flow because I'm not Zach. I didn't have the right flow like Zach has. He always asks in up front if there's any housekeeping, and I just bulldozed right into this. So maybe I should press pause for a second on this and just say very quickly before we get full tilt boogie, which I will never say again,
You
ever.
happy with that?
Never. Not happy at all. Very unhappy, in fact. Is there anything else that you would like to cover in advance of talking about this specific episode?
Yeah, there is one thing that I want to talk about. Just to let everybody know, Jamie Snow, our season 7 case, has a hearing coming up on March 25th. And there's information about that on the official Truth and Justice podcast fans page on Facebook. We'll post more about it when it gets a little closer. But Jamie has a hearing for to try to get some DNA testing done in his case. So we'll give you more information about that when it comes. But as a matter of fact, speaking of Bob Mata, I think Bob's going to go. Somebody had tweeted at me and Bob and a couple other people that this hearing was coming up, and of course that's in Illinois, in Bloomington, Illinois. If you're not familiar with season 7, Bob's a lawyer in Illinois. So I haven't talked to him, but on Twitter he said he's going. He'll go. So we'll at least have Bob to go to, kind of fill us back from a lawyer's perspective on what's going on. But it's good news.
Excellent.
Jamie Snow's case is a tough one, man. It's just because of the circumstances of it. There's just not a lot of evidence to work with. It was a armed robbery at a gas station where Bill Little was murdered, and it was kind of a smash and grab, in and out, shot him. There's not like, you can't test for fingerprints in a place where there's 5,000 people in and out during a day. It doesn't do you much
Right.
good. There wasn't like, we don't know if there was a hand-to-hand struggle where there might be any other DNA. So this at least has taken us a step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's great. The only other thing I would add is just, and Liz M, I know you asked questions about the dog. I would say I would encourage people to consider doing a little Patreon action with us for our pregame show, because we've been having a lot of puppy talk, on the pregame. So check that out, or you can check out Bob's socials, or both. But Monica just wanted a quick update on the student pods. How's it going with doing the local businesses? How are you guys doing with fundraising? How's that going, very quickly?
It's been going good. We had one listener just reached out and said they want to send us a donation. Another one reached out and said that they would like to sponsor. So I passed that information on to my student. They're going to reach out to them to get a sponsorship. But as far as like in our local community, they've done great. Almost
Great.
all of them secured some sponsorships for us. Like we actually have money in the budget now to be able to like file to pay for all these FOIA requests.
Awesome.
One group has fully recorded all three of their first three episodes. Another group has, I think, three of the groups have two of them done. They're in edit. So everybody's kind of in edit right now. But the one group, and they're doing the Skelton Brothers case out of Michigan here. They have all three recorded, and they're almost done editing. We're waiting on music from another student to start putting music on them. So we're close. I would say within a couple of weeks, we're going to start putting episodes out, and we keep getting more information too. Like one of the cases that they're working on, we kind of had a meeting about it today. They've already recorded the whole episode about it. One of the groups is doing a series on missing in East Lansing, where there's a series of missing persons cases where they think they might all be connected, and they already recorded the episode about this one particular case. And then in the mail today, a family member of the victim in that case who had told us that her deceased father had written a memoir about it. And then she had said a while ago that we'll send this to you, kind of forgot about it. Showed up in the mail today, a 600-page, and it's like, at this time, it's more like a journal of all this information that we didn't know. And so, the students are like, what do we do here? Do we like redo it, or do we? And I think what we
Which is a
landed on,
real thing that happens to podcasters and journalists, that's for sure.
yeah, I think what we landed on is that their episode's good. Let's put your episode out, and then we'll tease, because they're going to come back for 3 more episodes later, and we'll do another follow-up episode later where the whole episode will be about that memoir. So I think that's where we're going to go with that.
That's great.
It's
That's
going really
great.
good.
Okay, cool. Well, very cool to hear. Continues to be very exciting. Okay, so let's go back. So the thing that I was saying before we pressed pause was just the kind of, I felt like the conversation that you had with Bob there, like I said, I felt like there were things that seemed more nebulous than I was comfortable with, in terms of like relying on them as, okay, this was done, this was not done,
Right.
this person said this, or this document may have or may have not have said this. So I definitely walked away from that conversation feeling like, I don't want to say uneasy, but just having a feeling of like, oh, like I don't know what to do with some of this. You know what I
Agreed.
mean?
Agreed. And I do want to point out too, some mistress in the chat just points out when I was talking about the drones that no officer involved has acknowledged or stated that they use thermal drones. And that was one thing, like if they did, and you heard me asking Bob, like, how do we know about that? It sounded like that was something that was stated at trial, or there was, but just I want to be clear, I have not independently confirmed that that's happened. So,
Right.
but that's as far as that piece of it is concerned, it's like if that happened, then that's very intriguing to me. If it did,
Right.
maybe it didn't
Right.
happen. There's a lot of unknowns still in the case. But as far as like, like reading there's 4 elements, right, of this motion that was filed by the defense, and then the state responded to those 4 items. For me, 3 of those items, I don't think they didn't move the needle for me. As you guys
I
know,
agree.
yeah, as you guys, I'm sure you're aware, and I've been, look, I'll say this: there's people that are like firmly have decided a long time ago that before the trial that Richard Allen is definitely guilty, and some of those people are like I guess I don't understand. There's been a lot of hostility that's come like through like emails from me and like messages and stuff. And I know Bob gets it all the time. It's just really strange for me, especially coming from our audience, that like, what we try to do here, our main mission is to look at these cases objectively. And even though I cover wrongful convictions, I'm probably one of the most scrutinizing people when it comes to wrongful convictions because I have to screen hundreds and hundreds of these cases all the time.
And
99.9% of them.
often are like, sorry, I think this person is probably responsible.
Way more often
Yeah.
than I feel like somebody's guilty. And like you guys have heard of like this, I mean, there was an episode here. Janet and I probably came the closest we've ever had to a heated discussion over this. A couple months ago, several episodes back, because I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see anything that says this guy's not guilty at that point. So I'm just
Well,
only point.
I've never said that I think he's not guilty.
Oh, right.
What I was upset about was evidence. I was
Yeah.
just upset about the way I felt that those tests were done. I don't
Yeah.
know about it, and I also don't think that you should. To me, it does feel like I don't want to torture anybody, especially if we're giving them the presumption. I just want it to matter. I just want to do what we say and to be consistent and
Yeah.
to matter. But I'm not interested in anyway, point being, agreed. I just was very upset about I still don't understand how you can do something with a gun that isn't what was done
Yeah.
on the scene, and then somehow that's the test. I just didn't
Yeah.
get it. But anyway, go ahead.
So what I'm getting at is that like I certainly have not been in the Richard Allen is innocent camp. And to be clear, I'm still not in that camp.
I'm
But
not in it either.
but I don't have, from what I've seen from the evidence that was presented at trial, and that comes from mainstream media sources reporting on it, from Bob. I've listened to other content. I've listened to the Murder Sheet. I've watched other YouTube videos. I've tried to consume as much as I can from what's available. It just seems like the case was obviously, I think everyone agrees, was circumstantial. The confessions bother me. That
Yeah.
and as I said, like just because confessions came under bad circumstances doesn't mean that they're not legitimate. Like they still could be legitimate. I don't like, because people say, well, we heard him confess, but as I said when I was listening, I try to use the same measuring tape that I use off any other statement analysis I'm doing. And when I heard the confessions, the ones that were aired, and saw transcripts and saw people talking about the ones where he's recorded, you get a lot of, I think I did it, maybe I did it, I did it, but no. And what I said back then was, what I want to do when I'm evaluating a confession is I want to hear a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end, especially, and I want to see that they're revealing information that only the killer could know. And that's why, and that was kind of the discussion we had a while back or we were both, a little emotional about it, was, that this confession came in from Walla, the doctor.
Mhm.
And there was information in there that seemed to be guilty knowledge that no one should know. And that was, like I said, that was the one that was like, okay, now you have my attention. That's a confession. But even with that, it's still like, what leaves me in this kind of like, I can't just say I'm super confident he's guilty, because this comes secondhand, not recorded, no notes from the time. The person talking to them was active in, Facebook groups and forums where they were discussing the information that then came out in the confession. I'm not saying that means it's not true, but it just leaves me with that kind of, I'm a little uneasy about it feeling. But for the most part, and I wish Zach was here today. He's on assignment today. Like he was there we went out when we were in Berkshires, and we went out for dinner with Bob, and we're talking about the case. And he would tell you, like, I was like, I don't buy it. Well, I kept saying, it's like, to Bob, I'm like, if not him, who? Like, it just doesn't make, not that Bob was saying he's innocent, but I've been the biggest skeptic of Richard Allen could possibly be guilty or be innocent this whole time. But then, like, I'm seeing like people in our group that have been around for a long time that have working this, that have like dug into Richard Allen's definitely guilty. And it's like, today in the Facebook group, I posted a probable cause affidavit that I want to be. I'm like, look at this and read through it. And I have a question. Like, I want to know how this guy was cleared. and like people are angry, you're just so biased and you're not bringing up the other side, and I'm going to stop listening if you don't, because you insist on insisting that he's innocent. Like, you're not. First of all, I didn't say he's innocent. Second of all, I didn't draw any conclusion. Third of all, I'm not even putting up here a lawyer's opinion, a brief filed by one side or the other. I'm literally just putting up a document. This is just facts for us to consider. Like, that should not make anybody mad. We should be able to have a conversation around this thing. So all that being said, just my little ramble there. When I was talking to Bob this time, was in that conversation I had with Bob backing up to when we were in the Berkshires, what I kept telling him was, like, I don't see a plausible other scenario other than this was Richard Allen. Like, that was my big thing, is, the Odinism thing. Like, it's intriguing. It's intriguing that the guy that goes out to the car, that the law enforcement officers that were investigating thought that that might have legs. That the one guy said, "Am I going to be in trouble if I spit on her?" And I thought, that kind of, like, this is all troubling to me. But then I have to take a step back practically and be like, but what does that look like? Like,
Right.
these
Can you put
Odinists,
those people there? And yeah.
and how would they know the girls are there, and why did they go through all this much trouble so that they could, like, it's like this gets too, it's hard. I don't buy it. This conversation I had with Bob when we learned about the third prong of this, the argument made by the defense about Ron Logan, was the first time I was like, okay. And again, I'm not saying that I think he's guilty or that Richard Allen's innocent, but it was the first time for me where I was like, I can actually see a scenario. Now I can see a scenario that I could get, that I think could make sense. That doesn't seem implausible. That doesn't seem crazy out there. Like, it makes a lot of sense, enough to cause me to go and do more investigating and looking into some source material to try to figure out what the hell is going on here.
Right. Yeah, to me, to be honest with you, it was a relief to me to hear, and I'm perhaps he said it before, but it was a relief to me to hear Bob Motta say it doesn't, it's very hard to believe that someone would take them to another location and then risk bringing them back
Right.
to the location. Like, that was always put out there as like a possibility, but it was a relief to me to hear him say, which doesn't really make any sense. And and that's a situation where I can understand where again, and Bob, if you're listening to this, apologies. Like, you totally may have said that. Like, there's been so much content on this case and I've listened to all of his, but like, it just, a good defense attorney is pointing out the holes, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to take it to a logical conclusion, or that's, it makes it a better story if you can. But it was just nice to hear, because in my mind, every time that would come up where it was like, well, maybe they were taken in a car, I was just like, who takes that risk? I just don't see it. Take them out to a field somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Like, why would you ever return? Why ever? It never made any sense to me. So it was interesting that I've never heard him, that I don't remember hearing him say it doesn't make sense until there's a plausible reason potentially why it could make sense. And I think that's just a good defense attorney. I think that's just someone being like, let me ask the question. I'm not saying I know the answer, but let me just posit that this could happen. Well, people who believe that he's guilty, or people who are paying attention to that, I could see the frustration of them being like, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense. So give me something that makes sense. Like, I get that, you know?
And I pushed back on that hard in my conversation with Bob. And it wasn't like Bob was pushing a narrative. Bob was pointing out to me when we were out to dinner, well, there's all these elements that seem like the bodies were moved, that they were killed somewhere else and brought back here. And I had said then, I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, from everything I know, I'm certainly no expert, but I've got, 10 years of Jim Clemente tutelage of studying like crime scene behaviors. And it's like, if someone got them away from that place and killed them, there's no fucking way.
No way.
They're going to go back there to put their body. They're going to go dump them somewhere else. Like, it doesn't. And so that was kind of part of the thing too. So like, it is consistent with my line of thinking, which was, if not him, then who? And who else had an opportunity? I up to this point hadn't seen it. And why would someone possibly move the bodies? That doesn't make sense, except for, and this is consistent across the years we've been doing this, is it said, like, if you see somebody moving a body, it usually means one thing. the location where they were killed would connect the killer to the crime. And all of a sudden we find out, oh, there's a guy. And I knew this. I knew Ron Logan existed. I just didn't deep dove into him. It was like, oh, well, he's got, and I've heard the theory posited, well, he could have killed them up there at his place and then moved them down there. But I didn't know there was any like evidence that to support that
But
until
that in of itself is weird. But I mean, I know that people who follow this case more closely, i.e., in the courtroom, or I hesitate to say on Reddit because I don't know that you can trust anything on Reddit. I would love to say that you can. There's some great stuff on Reddit, but I just like, I'm too nervous about, I have it on good authority. But again, I know that people say that when Bob said he'd heard that there was thermal imaging, like that, I immediately, my first thought was like, that I need more.
Yeah, I need to
Bobby, I need
confirm
more.
that at least.
Like, I
I need to
cannot,
know.
I'm not, I am, from my perspective, I am going to walk away from the conversation you guys had not thinking that there was. Like, I
Right.
just can't. I can't think that I cannot take you on face
For me,
value. And
it's
I'm not saying he was saying that, but it
yeah. For
seemed
me,
like he was saying that.
it's just a pin in it because it's one of the, and that's why I was telling people like go
Yeah.
see how they work. So that if we find out later that there was or wasn't, you know what I'm talking. You know why I had that reaction when he said it because I was like, I've seen how those things work. Like that would be they would find them immediately with a thermal imaging drone if they had one up there. Um, but yeah, so even like it doesn't seem shocking to me in a scenario where Ron Logan maybe was involved that he would move the bodies back there because if he's got them at his house or in one of the barns, one of the outbuildings of his house, I was looking at aerial maps today to kind of see where all that stuff lays out. And they're there, and now the people are looking at him. He knows they're going to come to his house. He needs to get him out of there. He's not supposed to drive, right? He risks getting pulled over and driving. I could see just to get them away, go put them back where I found them. You know what I mean?
But
And it's just
what's the benefit to not, why, like, that's why you posted that thing, not to say, look, Richard Allen's innocent. You posted the thing to say, community, help me.
help me
Help
understand.
me. Why was he clear? Like, why wasn't he
Right.
like, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think it is frustrating that why is this being discussed now again? Like,
Yeah.
why, like, what about then? And then what about, and I'm sure there are people who tracked this better, but, and I think Mata even said it in the episode. He's like, I don't know why they spent so little time talking about Ron Logan and so much time talking about
Well,
Keegan, blah, blah,
that makes
blah.
sense to me. I think because what it was is they were trying to get the judge to allow third party culpability, and they had latched on to the Odinist theory. Like that was the theory, that was their trial strategy prior to that hearing. The pretrial hearing was they want to present to the jury that the Odinism angle was a thing. Personally, I'm guessing it's like I feel like the attorneys didn't catch everything that was in the discovery. And
Well,
this was a handwritten
maybe it was a ton of information.
and this was a handwritten, hard to read letter, the letter from Reese Davis.
I don't know about the Reese thing. To me, the probable cause, to me, the thing that you sent me from the FBI agent was very compelling.
Well, right, but and we'll get
A
to that.
guy,
One leads
in
to
prison.
another.
I just don't have enough information about that. I'm very, very, very skeptical
Right.
of somebody in prison saying someone told them something.
Right.
I mean,
And
it's just
we'll circle
very
back
hard for
to
me to,
that.
yeah.
And how that led down the path. But like they didn't have that. All they had was this thing, right? This handwritten document. But I think that the reason they didn't press, they were really pressing in that hearing to get third party culpability in. I think because they had law enforcement officers that were reaching out to them saying, we think this Odinism angle
Right.
has legs. They
Yeah.
were saying this person, all but confessed to them about it. And other people were saying that they were kind of turning on each other, all the stuff that we've talked about before. Right. So I think that's why they were pushing that angle and not, I think it was probably a strategy of not trying to throw too much shit against the wall. They're just like,
Right.
this is the argument we're trying to make. And we'll get into that in a second too when I go through the probable cause affidavit or the response from the state. Actually, I think I know it's kind of we got a ton of listener questions, but I've been doing a lot of research too, and so I want to get it out. And Janet's been reading stuff too. So I think the first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure. So Bob talked about the motion that was filed by the defense. There was also a response by the state that I think that we need to cover
Please.
both
Yeah,
sides of
I'd
that.
love to cover it.
So and I got this from I read through some of it quick. I didn't have a ton of time to read through it, but I did listen to the murder sheet episode on the response from the state. And I'll just say like I don't I have no issue with those. I don't know them. I don't know anything about them. But I'll say, like, the people that were like, you need a more balanced approach than Bob, listen to the murder sheet. It's not balanced, I'll tell you that. I mean, they're very, like, the first when I was listening to it, I was getting frustrated because at 23 minutes into it, when I was at the gym today listening, at that point, I'd heard, I think, 15 ads, and the entirety of it was them talking about how stupid the defense was and how stupid people are for listening to this. And like, I was just like, okay, like, just get to the point, get to the document.
Right.
But once they did, they went through kind of point by point what was in the state's response. So the first element was they raised the idea of Richard Allen being moved to the prison instead of staying in the county jail. And the argument they made, as Bob had explained, was that he supposedly had this attorney that was representing him at the time that wasn't present for that hearing when they moved him, and so they thought that should have been. And it's all because it's leading down the path to get to the conditions where the confession came in. Like, if you can
Right.
say he never should have been moved to the prison, then then you can argue that those confessions shouldn't be included also, is where they're going with it.
Right.
I will say I did not care for the murder. Like, I didn't need the constant commentary about how this was a ridiculous motion that they filed, and the lawyers are terrible and they're stupid and they shouldn't have done it. Like, I totally see why they did it. You know, I mean, like, not that it's going to be a winning argument, but they also, where I do agree with the murder sheet is it sounds like they weren't being that Richard Allen's attorneys weren't being particularly honest about that. Like, I guess what they presented was a receipt that that Richard's wife had paid to this attorney
Mm-hmm.
in an affidavit from her that said he was the attorney. But they didn't present any evidence from the attorney saying, yes, I was representing him, which was odd.
Hmm.
Like, and then the state easily debunked that whole thing in their response, because they said, well, one, he wasn't representing them. We have no evidence that he was. They presented an email from that attorney that said he was not representing him. So that was pretty easily put away. You know, that argument
Yeah.
was, so it was certainly not, I mean, I don't know if it was a mistake or dishonest, but, you know, when they said that he was, according to that attorney in this email that he sent, that he wasn't representing at the time. But the other thing was, it was not the term they used was, it was not a critical phase of the pretrial stuff.
Mm.
So there's certain times when you're entitled to have an attorney present where it is a correctable error if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And those have to do with where there's innocence and guilt that are involved. And in this type of hearing is not considered from the way the state put it, right? That's not considered a critical point. So it's like him not having an attorney there, even if he was represented, is not like a do-over scenario, because there's not a what's considered.
Even though it could potentially be argued that an attorney representing him in that moment would have become critical now that we have 2020 hindsight and we can
Right.
see. So to me, it feels like it's sort of a wash. Like,
Yeah.
again, I'm going right off of just like the most simple, just my gut instinct of what you just said based on the information you just gave me. It feels like a wash. It feels like that you're going to argue the side that's maybe a little disingenuous for you, and that the other one's going to argue a side that is also disingenuous, and then no one looks great.
Right, and that's exactly how what I didn't care for. Like, I really appreciated, like, them explaining. I really apologize. It's Anya, and I forgot the gentleman's name that's on that podcast. No disrespect, I just can't remember. But for some reason, Kevin is stuck in my head, and I
I
don't
think
think
that might
that's
be right. I think
Is
that
it?
might be right. I've never heard the podcast, but I genuinely got a very nice email from him one day that was like, I love the other stuff you do.
Yeah.
Which I was like, awesome. Like, I'm totally down for everyone having
Yeah.
different opinions. Like, let's just, as long as people are like being truthful and like trying to be respectful. And I said, I have issues with how people that I agree with have been about other people. You know what I mean? I was
Yeah.
just like, it's all good, bro.
Yep.
Like, and it
Tony in
is
the
all good.
Tony in the
Anyway.
chat says it is Kevin. Yeah, and I really, so Kevin, who is an attorney, like, explained the whole idea of it being like a critical phase of the trial and why that didn't matter, and so on and so forth. What I didn't care for was they kind of minimize, like, the way they put it was, who cares if he's sitting in a jail cell in the county or sitting in a jail cell in the prison? It's more to it than that. And I don't know about all their other coverage that they got. In fact, it wasn't that he was just sitting in a jail cell. They put him in a prison, put him in solitary confinement, cut him off from contact with his family and his wife while he was still innocent. Like, it was more than him just being in a different place, right? There was more to it
Right.
than that. I disagree that it was not an argument worth making, because, like you said, exactly as you said, Janet, that it leads down the path of, it became about his innocence and guilt because the confessions came while all that was happening. But if if the state responded to was accurate, that they had this email from this attorney said he wasn't representing him, seems dishonest, disingenuous, and also didn't move the needle for me. Like, there's a procedural thing I'm looking at. Is there anything that's factually telling me is he
Right.
innocent or guilty?
Yeah.
The next one was the video of Weber's van that was off by 15 minutes. In the state's response, they made clear to point out that, first of all, as you heard me with Bob, like, I don't think that matters. Like, when they're saying, well, they're assuming the time of death based on when Libby's phone stopped moving.
Right.
Like, to me, that doesn't mean it, because it means that's when she dropped her phone. Like, that doesn't tell us anything. So I don't think that matters. But also, on the murder sheets, they got into a little more, and and they were reading from the response.
Mm-hmm.
So the timestamp on that video, it said whatever the time was, 2:45 or whatever it was. It said AM. And in the response, they said, well, obviously it's not AM because the sun's out, so it must be flipped and it's 2:45 PM. But they made a great point on the murder sheets and saying, and it was a great point. And again, I keep saying on their podcast, but they were reading from the document.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, well, we don't know that it was 2:45 PM. What we know is that the clock is off. Like,
Correct.
there's no way of verifying. Like, it could have been 4:45 for all we know.
Correct.
Yeah.
As long as once one thing is incorrect about it, I think you throw the whole thing away. And guess what? That's also how I feel about the gun evidence.
Yeah.
Once one thing doesn't work with your whole testing process, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think that I'm not interested in the timing. If the clock was wrong, the clock was wrong. Who cares? Yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
them. Totally.
Now, if it was for sure that it was timestamped 2:45, I think factually it doesn't matter. I think that it matters as an error at trial, though, because it would have mattered because the prosecution made the point, their final arguments to the jury, from what everyone reported, was, we know she died at this time, and we know that he drove through there at that time, and we know his confession says that he killed them when the van drove by. And so the prosecution is what tied that timeline together. In reality, if it's 15 minutes later, that doesn't mean anything to me. Like, that doesn't, like, we don't know if she could have dropped the phone, like, none of that. But then when it gets down in the state's reply to that, where you're seeing that, like, yeah, they're guessing that it was 2:45 PM,
Right.
essentially.
Well,
So
I mean, if you put it up against a case that we do know very well, which is a nonce case, it does matter in the sense that if the state picks a hard and fast timeline, and
yeah,
and they need that timeline to support their case, to the exclusion of almost everything else, because a lot of stuff doesn't work, for example, then it does matter in the sense that, like, they're saying that this was a come and get me call that was so tied to their theory of the case, then it does matter. Now, at the end of the day, does it matter more than being able to account for a nonce time at every crucial moment that mattered, that really showed, like, here are all the reasons why he couldn't have been responsible? No, I think it was very important to show all of those other reasons, because otherwise you could have just said, like, okay, so they were wrong about that one call, but, like, that's not enough to throw it out because he could have just done
right.
it a half hour later.
Yeah,
Like, I think that falls more to what we're seeing potentially here, again, based on limited knowledge. But it
yeah,
seems like it'd be like, okay, so it doesn't match this exact thing, but, like, is that enough?
yeah. And in my opinion, it's not.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it wouldn't be enough if
Right now, I agree. With no more information, I completely
yeah,
agree.
if the time that they are assuming that it was actually that where it actually occurred is accurate, it means nothing to me. But also when we learn that, well, they literally just guessed about the time,
Right.
then it's like, well, that's useless. That's completely useless. I agree with that. I'm going to skip 3 because that's the big one that did get me, and go to 4, which was the expert that came out and said that there was that dirt and moisture couldn't have caused the reading on the phone that said that there was something plugged into the headphone jack. This one's weird for me because it doesn't make any sense to me. Like,
Yeah.
in what scenario would and
Yeah.
essentially the prosecutor's response to that was that, it just, like, it's absurd to think that the killer, hours after the girls are dead, plugged a headphone into the phone for 5 hours and then unplugged it. Like that, like, and maybe there's some scenario where that works out, but I agree with them on that. Like, what does that, like, why would anyone do that? It doesn't make any
I agree
sense.
that I've never heard anyone interpret that evidence in a way that was enough for me or made sense to me. I know that people have said if the phone started to ring, you like someone postulated like, oh, if you put the the headpiece in, then suddenly the ring isn't there anymore because the ring is only in the headphone. So it essentially silences that. Okay, but I agree with you. Like that's not. I just it was never presented to me in a way that was like, wow, you're right. It's like, who has the best story? It goes back to that.
Right.
Who has the best story? Where does that fit into the story? What under what circumstances, other than just the argument that I'm showing you that the phone was handled in some way, like I'm proving to you the phone was handled in some way. Again, I just don't. Where does that all fit in the story in a way
I
that
think the only way it would matter, and why the reason was important for the defense, was simply because um, if that was happening in the hours it was happening, we know Richard Allen was home at that point, so it couldn't be Richard Allen, right? So that's the reason they're making the argument. The way the state did in this part, I did disagree with. They also said, well, this particular expert was only certified to testify as an expert in 2023, just a year and a half before this trial happened. So she hasn't been doing it very long. I don't like she's still like still an she's got more expertise than you do. And then that was one thing I did not like on the murder sheet. They just kind of went on how the way they framed it was, because remember that was the whole thing where
he
the
Googled it.
they had to go Google it. And they literally said on the stand that they
Yeah.
Googled it to find out that it could have been debris or whatever. Um, my position on it is like a Google search does not equal somebody with all the training, education, and background that this person has that is an actual expert. Their take on it was your argument's pretty shitty if it can be countered by Google.
And I get that.
Yeah, I
I
don't.
get that.
I really don't. I'm like,
no, I get it. I get it in the sense I'm not saying I get that I agree with it. I'm saying it's a great way to frame that, because
yeah,
if you can say this is so common and so well known that it's like you had an expert get on to say, you know, the eye perceives vision through light. And then this person had to go Google that and they could say, yes, the eye perceive, like it's such a well-known thing, or it's such a foregone conclusion. It's so basic that you don't need an expert. All you
yeah,
need is Google to show that, it could have been debris or whatever. I get the use of that argument. I think that that's a perfect example of like, and I will say, like, one of the podcasts that I don't listen to anymore, but that I enjoyed for a while. I think the best thing they said, and it definitely wasn't that there's ghosts. The best thing that they said ever was make sure you imagine every single legal scenario working against you
yeah,
as well as in your favor. Be sure, because it is an entire ethical principle set on precedent. So if you're going to tell me that we're going to be cool with someone dismantling an expert's testimony by Googling it, you better be goddamn ready for that to get used in a case where you're sure you're right, and that Google gets used against you or used against the person you agree with.
yeah.
You got to be able to flip it. And I think it's such a great, smart thing to say. And I agree with it. And I'll always agree with that. Be ready,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a dangerous place to say, big deal. Someone could Google it and talk about it on the stand. Be careful. Be careful.
Right.
And remember you said that.
Yep. And that one for me is, I don't know, there's not enough evidence there for me that, like, if you were able to definitively say someone definitely plugged headphones into it and unplugged it, then obviously that's huge for Richard Allen because he didn't do that. But I just don't know that there's nothing that I can latch onto and say,
I agree.
yeah, that's a big
It
thing to
feels
move.
tenuous. It doesn't feel like, wow, this person shouldn't have been convicted because of the headphones. I can't get there either. And it's all opinion. This is all
Right.
opinion.
So the Ron Logan stuff, we heard about the inmate, that Reese Davis, that wrote to the prosecutor and said that Ron Logan confessed. My initial reaction to anything like that, because we see this stuff all the time, is some jailhouse
Bullshit.
snitch is bullshit. But what, and you heard in the episode, what got my attention on that is what I'm always looking for is, and it's consistent with me, is there a story with a beginning, middle, and end? Is there a full narrative? And is there guilty knowledge that no one should know? And the fact that he said in 2017 that Ron Logan told him that he slit their throats with a box cutter, And no one knew that at the time. No one knew even that their throats were slit. It was not public knowledge at the time. That's when I'm like, oh, well, whoa, 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 whoa. How did he know that? Like,
Right.
how could that he have known that? Now, what the state and what I want to go through is the stuff from the state's reply to it. There were also several things that were factually inaccurate from that statement, that handwritten statement. One of them being, he said that Ron told him that he had taken the battery out of the cell phone and put it back in. And
Yeah.
keep in mind, this all happened in 2017 when they said this. So it's not like this was after the trial when he's hearing all this stuff. This was a long time ago when this happened.
And and let me just say, and we're sure. We're sure of this?
Sure of
Like,
what?
this is another example of after you guys got, that the conversation, I was like, I just want to make sure we are positive that this person reported all this in 2017. I just want to make sure we're positive
It
of that
was,
because
I
I
did
don't
look it
know.
up, and it may have been 2018, but it was way back then.
Okay. Okay.
Because Ron Logan died of COVID in like 2020, I think. Like he was dead well years before the trial happened. So it was well before that, and nobody knew that the throats were slit. No, that was never confirmed to anyone until the trial. Like I didn't know that. Maybe the deep dark holes of Reddit somewhere knew it, but I didn't know that because that was one of the things I was constantly saying. We don't even know the manner of death.
Right.
Um, so that's what got my attention. But
And it did say that in the letter. That wasn't like just an
yeah,
interpretation of the letter. Okay. I
no,
just want to
that's
make
what it
sure.
said in the letter. Yep.
Just want to make sure.
And but then he said that that Ron told him that he took the battery out of the cell phone and then put it back so they couldn't find it. Obviously, that phone did not have, I think it was an iPhone, did not have a removable cell phone. That cannot be true.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Um, there were. Hang on, I'm reading my own notes right now. So
Man, this
they
guy was 77. I mean, that is not young.
No, but I mean,
That is
there's a
just not
lot of
young.
videos on him. So this led me to, I'm trying to say, the other thing was that he failed the polygraph test. And then they also, one thing the state did in their reply that was either a mistake or dishonest is they said that in the letter from Reese that Ron told him that he burned the girl's clothes. And they're like, that's not possible because their clothes, other than I think like a pair of underwear and one sock, were
Mhm.
all found on the crime scene. So he didn't burn the girl's clothes. But if you read his actual statement, he didn't say that Ron said he burned the girl's clothes. He said that Ron said he burned his own clothes because he was afraid that he got blood on
Oh,
them. So that
okay.
was either a mistake or that was intentional,
Right.
misdirect there because they
Right.
were, that's not what he said.
Okay.
And of course he failed the polygraph test. He requested, I'll point out that the Reese Davis requested to do a polygraph, and then he failed the polygraph, which that also doesn't mean anything to me that he failed the polygraph. And as we on the record, he didn't ask for anything, nor do I think he would have got it. I mean, he was sentenced; he's going to be in prison for 50 years. I don't know what he would have been asking for, but maybe he did. But also, I'm always skeptical of that because we've seen every other case we have where they're like, "Oh, we're not asking for anything," but then, oh,
Again, yeah.
they got a deal anyway, right?
We just gotta be
Imagine that.
consistent. I think exactly right. Like, I don't want to be, and I'm sure I do it, and I know I have biases that show up even when I don't realize they're showing up. I know all of that. And I also said I want people to be respectful, and then I said something mean about the people and the ghost thing, so I apologize. I got fired up, but we should be consistent. If it's a thing that we consistently say, don't trust this, and then someone we like or tend to agree with says, "But wait, what about this?" And then we look at it and we turn it in a different direction and go like, "Oh, cool. Actually, in this case, maybe it does work." Like, I don't wanna do that. I
Right.
wanna be able to say 9 times out of 10, it sure seems like this is bullshit, and I just kind of I feel like I need to give it the same weight we usually do, which is
Yeah.
like,
Well,
"Uh-uh."
and for me, what I try to do is look at it with skepticism, but look to see if is there information there that again, I can't stress enough. For me, the thing that led me down the path I'm about to go into was how did he know their throats were slit? And there is
Yes.
an issue with the phone. And also you're hearing stuff secondhand a game of telephone, right? So
Right.
somebody in the chat said that that Davis never said anything about us about taking a battery out either. I read that somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I know the state's response said that he claimed that maybe they were saying that he said that in an interview. There are recorded interviews of him that haven't been released. No one's heard the recorded interviews that
But
they've
what's the benefit to not act? I mean, that again, okay, sorry, you're gonna go down the road. But I agree that we have, someone, I'll just give you a quick shout out. Like, Maria said, these people were investigated before Richard Allen came onto the radar. What is the benefit? What Marinda says, what's the purpose for the police to ignore all of this if it was legitimate? They had time to be looking at all this other stuff, and why wouldn't they, if it was going to pan out, or if it was real, then wouldn't it have gone down that road? And I hear you guys. I feel
Yeah.
I asked those same questions. Anyway, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I'll circle back to the when we get to the questions, but I don't want to derail myself from all of this. So, also in the response, the state says that they said that there's basically saying this is all the stuff we know, and including they said, and they used the word that they had a bullet on the crime scene that matched Richard Allen's gun, which that is bullshit. It did not match Richard Allen's gun. There was sufficient agreement in a scenario where they couldn't replicate the same parameters. I don't the innocent or guilty, that gun evidence is bullshit. That bullet evidence is bullshit.
Again, and you have to be willing to put that in a bunch of situations. There may come a time where that same kind of argument is made, and it's something that you tend to agree with, the other side or whatever. Just be ready for, to know, like, oh, I was one of those people who said it was cool to do the tests wrong. And now that's being used against my family, or this is being used against something that I'm pretty sure I know that this person did do, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you just have to be real careful with that.
Yeah. And that goes for a lot of things, even outside of the criminal justice system. They also said in the response that, he said that Davis said that Ron had told him that he moved the bodies. And in the response, it says, we heard testimony that said the bodies weren't moved other than Libby's body moved a little bit. But now this leads me to where I'm going. So I heard all that. It was enough that it perked my attention up that I was like, okay, wait a minute.
Right.
This seems like the idea. This could make sense why someone would move the body, where no other scenario does make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
The guilty knowledge that seems to be presented, which could be a luck. It was framed on the murder sheets as a lucky guess. But the fact that he said their throats were slit with a box cutter, and they heard testimony at trial that said their throats were slit, and it could have been consistent with a box cutter. So that that's obviously was enough intriguing to me to say, okay, well, let's look into this guy. Yeah. Some of the things that I said when Richard Allen came up is where I had issues were, number one, obviously the case was circumstantial, and it wasn't a strong circumstantial case against him, in my opinion. So it left me feeling really, in the confession scenarios were just left me feeling wonky about the whole thing. But the other thing was, I would expect in a crime like this to see, pre-offense behavior that builds up to this. We don't see any of that with Richard Allen. I would expect post-offensive behavior to be demonstrative of them having just committed such a horrific act, especially if there's no pre-offense behavior where they have no history of this. Then this is the first time they do something horrible like this. There should be some signs afterwards that something's going on. According to his wife, we don't see anything like that. He's sitting home on the couch when she gets home, and everything's normal, and everything's normal for all the years afterwards. So I didn't see the pre and post offense behavior with him. So I look at this and I'm thinking, okay, so let's see if there's any legs to this Ron Logan thing. But I want to see, I don't want to see lawyer spin. I want to see actual like documents and evidence, verifiable facts where we can see what's going on. So that led me to the first place it led me to was there are several interviews with one of Ron Logan's ex-girlfriends where she was interviewed after the fact. She, in her interviews, and according to her, somewhere I want to say like a couple weeks after the murders, she saw the video of Bridge Guy, that little snip we've all seen of him walking, and she said, holy shit, that's Ron. I know his gait. I know how he walks, that limp. He's got a bad hip, like the way that he was walking, kind of funny. And his stature, the clothes, everything, that's right. She even said, a lot of people have speculated that there looks like there's a fanny pack on him. She said that he always carries a gun and he carries it in a fanny pack. And so she called the police. So there were some people that are like, well, nobody ever called a tip about it. Yes, they did. His ex-girlfriend called the police and said, that's Ron Logan. Like, that is absolutely him. And she, to this day, she's been interviewed again. These were old interviews all the way leading up to new interviews where she said she's still convinced that is him. The voice, she said, sounded just the down the hill. The voice sounded like him. That's him. In further interviews with police, we find out that, she told them that he was incredibly controlling and violent, sexually violent, that he physically assaulted her. She had and then another ex-girlfriend. Well, let me back up. All that stuff with her, I was like, okay, that doesn't seem good. So then I start doing a little more digging, and I find a probable cause affidavit that was filed by the FBI, not by the local law enforcement, by the FBI to search his home for evidence. And in the probable cause affidavit, they do exactly that. They list out the probable cause. So we get to see why the FBI, after analyzing the case and in investigating Ron Logan, thought that there was enough probable cause that he should be a suspect. And the list is long. One, they talked about this girlfriend who had been interviewed and another ex-girlfriend who the FBI interviewed, who had said he was violent, that he beat her over the head with a crescent wrench at one point. Or I think that was the first ex-girlfriend, that he had beat her over the head with a crescent wrench. One of them had a restraining order against him, that he was violent, sexually abusive, all these things that they said. So there's some, all of a sudden now I see some pre-offense behavior that's concerning. It gets into the post-offense behavior. They interview him, and they interviewed him, I think, the day after, right? The day after the crime happened, like the day they were found, somewhere early. In that interview, he tells them that he went to this tropical fish store that I think is like a 22-minute drive from his house. And his cousin drove him there, and they went and got fish, and he picked him up at, I want to say he said at like 2:00, picked him up, or whatever the time was he said. They drove there, and he got the fish. They talked to the cousin confirms that, but then the cousin tells him that that he didn't do that. And this is the part that really, as far as post-offense behavior, according to him in this FBI probable cause affidavit, if you look at the times, he said that Ron called him on February 14th, 2017, and told him that he needs to tell police that he gave Ron a ride to this fish store at the window that covered the time that we now know is when the girls were murdered. And he was not. It's also important to point out the girls had not been found yet at that point. So no one knows the girls are murdered. They're just missing. And he asks his cousin to, according to his cousin, asked him to lie for him and create an alibi for him. Now, the spin that I've seen people put on this is, well, he had his license suspended and he was driving, and he doesn't want the police to know that he was driving, and that's why he told him to say that his cousin drove him. But his cousin said no. He drove to a transfer station to dump some trash that day, and he didn't ask him to cover him for that. He only asked him, that he drove him for that. Only asked him to cover him for the window of time when the girls were killed, when nobody knew that they were dead at all at that point. So that's some post-offense behavior that is also very concerning to me. Janet, you read it too. I have to go back to my notes to remember all the things that were in there. Do you remember anything else that I'm missing?
Okay, so the alibi, the abuse, I thought that she's in the probable cause. It says that the girlfriend said, I didn't even realize that the guy on the bridge was the suspect. I thought
Right.
it was wrong. I thought they were
She
like,
thought they
hey,
were
we're looking for Ron
Ron.
Logan.
Yeah.
But how does that time out timing wise? Because they released that video so much later. Like, it seemed like it was, that seems like a weird thing to say, because like, I feel like the only context under which that video was released at all was like so much later after the crime, after wasn't it later than that they released?
I can look it up, but I want to say that the date she called the police was March 3rd.
Okay.
Which would be like 2 weeks later. But I remember seeing it like pretty early on, at least the still image. I remember seeing it. Maybe it was the still image that she saw. But I know in one of the interviews I saw, once she saw the gate, and then when they released the audio, where she saw him walking. And then there's a lot of videos of him online. You can see him at one point walking. It's been presumed that the bridge guy was walking with that limp, be kind of that kind of sidestep, because the bridge was uneven. Right. But then, and I'm not saying this is like, this is concrete evidence or anything, but there's videos of him walking through prison, and he's got that exact, I see why she would look at that and say that's him, because he's got that exact same gait that you see on Bridge Guy. They could be, they could be different reasons. One could just be a normal guy with, without a limp that's just walking on an uneven bridge, and the other one is because he's got a hip problem. But it is the same gait. And then the more I go down the rabbit hole, I see the videos of him being interviewed on the day after the murder, wearing a blue jacket and like a brown camouflage hat. That when you look at, I sent it to Janet earlier, the side by side of them, like it, it could absolutely be the exact same jacket and coat you see in the bridge guy photo. Like they're the same color. They're the same. Like it looks pretty fucking similar. You can see. I don't. What do you think,
The
Janet?
hat, the jacket actually didn't. The jacket I felt very mixed on. The hat, the idea of your looking down and the way that hat looked compared to how to that hat. I mean, to me, that was like that sort of stopped me in my tracks. To me, that looked like the most plausible again, and that video is such a mess. It's so grainy. It's just hard, and it's,
Yeah,
obviously been, like, the bane of everyone's existence because you think it's gonna help you so much, and then it doesn't. But that was the first time I saw something where I was like, "Oh, that looks to me like it is could that would make sense for the shape and the color." That's was my again, subjective, everyone
yeah.
sees things differently.
It's nothing
Yeah.
concrete, but it's just
It
like
certainly proved again that, like, everyone dresses like that, as we've heard over and over from
yeah, and it's
so
nothing
many people,
concrete, but,
but
like, some of the arguments I was seeing from people, like, on social media were like, "Well, he didn't own a blue coat and a hat like that, and nobody called it." It's like, "No, yeah, his ex-girlfriend saw it and again, didn't know it was for Delphi, saw the video and thought they were looking for Ron." She was so sure that it was him.
I just
And
don't know how she didn't know it was for Delta. I mean, Delphi. I think again, that's all just a personal opinion. I'm just like, how do you ever with what a huge, huge story this was, how does that video or the picture ever cross your line of sight without you knowing the context, which is 100% this is about Delphi, which must mean
right,
it's probably the suspect, but I don't know. So that
yeah.
feels like a could be, a drama sort of a dramatic interpretation, like a dramatic way of saying something if you're trying to make your point, like whether or not that's true of this person. But like, what's the I don't know. Like if all of this is so compelling, then what? Then
Well,
they
and
just
that's the
didn't have
question.
enough and they were just like, we got to keep looking because we don't have enough. Like,
That's the question that I'm posing because, like, I'm looking at this. I mean, the FBI, and again, that like this is not like some lawyer spinning this. This is what the FBI listed as all there, and I posted it on the Facebook. If you just look up Ron Logan probable cause affidavit, it'll come up. You can look it up, find it if you don't see it on our Facebook page. It's worth, I think it's like 11 pages. It's worth reading all the stuff the FBI had. But yeah, you had so we already have from the confession story, right? That supposedly somehow Reese Davis either guessed or somehow knew that the girls' throats were slit. And that's a problem. You've got him calling when no one knows the girls are dead, calling his cousin and asking him to alibi him for the exact time of the murders. And then later he presents his alibi. He presents a receipt from the fish store, but the receipt was from like 5:30 something p.m. And in his interview, he says that his cousin drove him straight there. He bought the fish and drove straight back. And I wish I'd written down. I'm drawing a blank. I want to say that he said he picked him up at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock or whatever time it was. All I remember looking at is going, well, if that's the case, it's a 22-minute drive. That means he spent 3 hours at the fish store. Like that. Like we know at what point he purchased the fish. But if he's saying he just drove there and straight there, got the fish, drove back, and his receipt was at 5:30 p.m., that means he could have left his house at 5 p.m. or 4:45 or 4:30 p.m., 2 hours after the girls were murdered. Like that's not an alibi at all. And if he's and then and like the stories aren't adding up. He tried to manufacture an alibi through lies. I heard somebody saying, I don't remember where. Did it say anything? I don't remember where I read it. I don't think it was in the probable cause affidavit that he tried to pay his cousin or tried to pay somebody to lie for him about his alibi or something to do with a lawyer. Did that ring a bell? Must not have been in the affidavit.
yeah, I didn't for me, if you're asking me about the affidavit, no. I don't
Yeah,
remember seeing something about paying someone. What did the murder sheet say about the whole Ron Logan thing?
it's a joke. It's stupid. It was a waste of time. Um, I mean, that was the part where it turned me off. It's like I'm not saying
The
that anyone should.
FBI said it wrote a probable cause and it's a joke? I mean, I
They
guess
well, they didn't mention. They maybe did an episode about some other time, but they certainly didn't mention the FBI's probable cause affidavit in their reporting on the state's response to
right.
this. Their
Which
state's
I
response.
totally understand. Again, like I that's how I felt when I saw it. I was like, why are we talking about, like, I've heard about Ron Logan. Why is he back in the picture right now? Like,
Yeah.
why? Like,
Well,
I mean, I definitely didn't totally understand.
and it's getting even more so because in searching for this, I found another news report where Reese Davis wrote a letter to a local news. I don't remember which is. I think it must be an Indianapolis
Yeah,
news.
you sent me that link too, where they reported on that they've written, like, and they said that he wrote like 7 letters to the prosecutor,
Yeah,
and
and again,
all
so
of that should have been in the,
then that kind of takes in the motivation. Like maybe he's just trying to be. I don't know because like he's certainly not getting a break or a deal from the news. But when this stuff came out, he wrote a letter to this news station telling them what had happened, what Ron Logan had told him, and that he had written. He said 6 or 7 letters to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor would never get back to him, and that could potentially be an issue. Now I think the defense is demanding to see those letters because like if those exist, those were never turned over in discovery to us. So I don't know. There's a lot going on there. Again, I'm certainly not sitting here saying Ron Logan did it, Richard Allen is innocent. But I think that if your position is this is all stupid nonsense and there's nothing to see here, I don't see it that way. I see a guy who has pre-offense behavior of being violent. His ex-girlfriend also said that in her interviews that she had concerns about him with young girls. There was some 13-year-old girl that had bought a horse from them, and she thought she said touchy feely with her, and they fought about it or whatever. So you have violent from 2 different sources that we had violent pre-offense behavior towards women. We have and sexual assault type behavior from them as well. You have possibly, I mean, that's hard to really pin down the way she said, but an interest in young teenage girls. It's just something to put out there. She said it. We don't know if that's verifiable or not. You got the fact that the alibi he gave doesn't make sense. He says that he's at this fish store at the time the murders happened, and then he presents a receipt that shows he was there 3 hours after they were killed, and it's only 30 minutes away. And then we find out that he asked his cousin to lie for him for the exact time when the murders happened before anyone knew the girls were killed. And then you have the confession with the potential, the jailhouse snitch saying that he had confessed with the guilty knowledge of the box cutter. To me, that's enough to say that I'm not just blowing it off because I think Richard Gallen's guilty. Like I can't do that. My job and me as a human is to look at this objectively and the evidence. Like that's compelling. And what I posted with that probable cause affidavit was does anyone know how he was cleared? I know that
right.
they got they did get the search warrant and they searched his house and found nothing incriminating, but that was a month after the fact. So maybe that was it. Maybe it was as simple as that. They had this circumstantial evidence, and I don't know where that falls in the timeline of when the confession stuff came in. If they went and searched his house for some kind of evidence, didn't find any evidence, and they're like, "Oh, we don't have anything. All we have is circumstantial stuff." I don't know. But with all that, unless you have anything else to add on that, we probably should get into at 1 hour into this into some
Well,
listener
yeah. I mean,
questions.
and I think I want to say some of this we've answered, but maybe, yeah. And I agree with you. Again, super on the fence. Super on the fence. Um,
I guess I would describe my position now as less comfortable with the conviction than I already was.
I agree with you. I mean, I've never felt super comfortable about the conviction
Right,
for
me
all the
neither.
reasons that we've already talked about. And you said it best early on. You're like, my worst nightmare is this is a guilty person, and it was done wrong,
Right.
and
The questions will still be out there,
these
or maybe
questions
he
will
ends
still
up
be out
getting
there
out as a guilty person. I don't know.
because things weren't handled properly, and etc. Yeah,
Correct.
because that's the worst possible outcome
Yeah.
for the family is like more nightmare. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
is it the worst possible? I don't know. That's I just said that off the cuff. I'm going to totally own that.
Before you
Okay.
go to the next one,
Yeah.
I'll circle back to the one you asked earlier. So the big
Yep.
question people are asking was, and it's a legitimate argument. People have said this, like, if there's all this evidence against him, then why wouldn't they just pin it on Logan?
100%.
Why would and
That's what I wanna know.
my answer, I don't know. I think that I feel like the investigators in this case were slow to act. I feel like they went through what, 7 years of or 6 years where they're just they needed to have all open and shut case to close it, and they weren't going to do it. And I think with Richard Allen getting, I mean, because let's be honest, Richard Allen's confessions came a year after he was locked up, and for this already. So forget that. Go back to when they arrested him. Look at what they arrested him on. They've had a bullet casing that they claimed was a match to his gun, but they knew exactly what we know now, that really all it was if they fired the shot, they could find sufficient agreement, and they could not exclude it from other guys. The same agreement with Brian Weber and who knows how many other guys. Like, and then they used that to get the search warrant for his house. They went in and they found nothing in his house. That's all they had on him. They had nothing else on him when they arrested him. At the time, you had Leggett, I think his name, the sheriff, was up for re-election. There was a lot of pressure. I think something changed at that point where they made the arrest on Richard Allen. And they got lucky that the confessions came later, but let's go back to that point. So I think that, and I don't know, all any of us can do is speculate. I think they probably at the beginning and for the several years probably were trying to make sure that they got it right. I think they had a real determination to get it right. So I think that maybe they have this confession and then they give Davis a polygraph and he fails it. So like, I don't know, it's a jailhouse snitch to begin with. And he failed the polygraph. And then and we did a search of his house and we didn't find any evidence there. So what are we going to go to trial with? Like, it's all, that he lied about an alibi. That's not enough, right? That's not enough to get a conviction. And then he died. Right. So then, you go 4 years later down the road, and then at some point they just all of a sudden pull the trigger and say, Richard Allen's our guy with, I would hope everyone could agree, no fucking evidence that he was the guy at the time. They
I mean,
really didn't.
I don't think you're gonna get everyone to agree with that at all, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, am I forgetting? Because I don't want to be biased here. Like, the bullet was it, right? When they arrested him?
I
Or what?
think I wanna say they said we found a jacket that might have been it.
He had
I
a blue
mean,
jacket.
yeah, I don't think, I mean, I don't, again, I don't think that's like saying, I mean, it's like the Vans thing. It's like he also wore Vans.
Yeah,
Like
there was
that should
absolutely
make you
nothing.
nervous.
There was not enough solid evidence, in my opinion, to make that arrest. And we
Yeah.
were led to believe that they had the evidence because of the whole match of the bullet, but we know how that turned out later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, to answer the question, in my opinion, I think something changed when they arrested him and they're like, we're making an arrest. This is our guy. In order to get any further with Logan, they would need to pull him in and interrogate him and try to get more out of him, but he's dead. They can't do that with him.
Right.
So I think they're just like, this is good enough. Let's go. And maybe they got the right guy. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I think I don't think it was from the beginning they wanted to pin it on a patsy. So why didn't they pin it on Logan? I think they spent a long time like wanted to make sure they got it right. And then they got to a point where they're like, we need to do something. We got to shit or get off the pot here. And this is the closest we got, and let's go with it.
Yeah. Bonnie says, do either of the other two individuals discussed as possible suspects look like Bridge Guy? Because that is what makes me lean towards Richard Allen. We've covered that in the sense that in the context of the ex saying, yes, I thought so. We covered
and
it in
more
the
than that
context of you
too.
saying we looked at those pictures and said, well, it's not crazy.
Yeah, well, and there's a little bit more than that as well, because another thing people were arguing with me is, look at that guy on the bridge. He's short, and this guy's 6'2". Can't be him. In the probable cause affidavit, the FBI analyst said that Ron Logan fit the build of Bridge Guy upon them analyzing that photo and that video. So that was right in the probable cause affidavit from the FBI. So that's not like you're saying they're short. Well, they made the case that, look, his pants are rolled up, whatever. He's a short guy. We don't know that, but it's also not crazy to say, yeah, he fit the build, because the FBI analyst said, literally, they said he fit the build and his voice was not dissimilar from the Down the Hill voice.
And also, don't be disingenuous. Let's all play by the same rules. I have to be willing to throw away stuff if we're evening things out. if you have eyewitnesses that you're trying to have identify Richard Allen, and none of them can say the guy I saw was extremely short, he was shorter than me, or he was the same height as me. If you can't get people up on the stand to say, yeah, the guy totally matched Richard Allen's description, then I don't know what we're talking. Like, why are we like,
Assuming
if we
he's
don't
short.
have that with a person who's in prison for the crime, then like, why are we now nitpicking over Ron Logan, being like, can't be Ron? I just, to me, that's disingenuous. Like,
Yeah, because to be
we
clear,
don't
what you're talking
have
about is there were
we don't have
witnesses.
agreement. Yeah.
Yeah, there were witnesses that said they saw a short person out there that very well may have been Richard Allen,
There
but
are
those same people did not say that. Like, there's no confirmation
the
that.
people who said they saw who they thought was Bridge Guy, or the people who saw someone that they were uncomfortable about or felt was suspicious or
Right.
didn't like, and they're trying to make that be Richard Allen, did not match the description of Richard Allen. They did not say this was a person who was 5'4" or 5'5" or 5'6". They said he was about 5'10" or he was taller than me, whatever. So
Yeah.
if you have eyewitnesses who can't say the person that, I mean, it just doesn't make sense
And
to me.
if I remember correctly, none of them in the courtroom were able to identify
None of them.
Richard Allen as that
No,
person.
they were never even
Right.
asked to, which you should ask
So that
yourself
needs to
why.
be, I think, at least balanced out to answer your question in the
Yeah.
fact that you have the ex-girlfriend of Ron Logan that was sure that was him, and then you have the FBI analyst who said that Ron Logan's build fits the build of Bridge Guy.
Jim says nobody knows a man's wardrobe better than his wife. Has Bob Mata ever asked Kathy Allen if she thought R.A. was the guy in the still photo released a few days after the murders? If so, what did she say? If not, why not? If she thought it was him in the photo, could that explain why he didn't give a statement about being on the bridge until after the photos were released? Like some sort of, hey, honey, that looks like you. You need to go down there and clear this up kind of scenario.
I don't know. It might have been. I know that Kathy Allen's convinced that, to this day that Richard didn't do it. I don't know, and we know that he did have a blue coat, so I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. And Rinda, I already shouted you out. I agree with you. I think that's a big sticking point that's uncomfortable about the idea of like, what about all this other stuff that was in the mix before Richard Allen? It's not like, it's a great point in the sense of like, we can't say it's tunnel vision. Like often we say in a wrongful conviction case, we say they focused on this person to the exclusion of everyone else from the jump. That's tunnel vision. That's what happened here. I agree with you. That isn't what we're saying. And that troubles me. But you did give the context of some other possible factors like elections, which is just the most cynical thing to ever have to bring in. And I remember it was one of the first things I wanted to poo-poo about any case we've ever worked on or any case I ever heard about wrongful convictions. The first thing I thought sounded like complete bullshit was like, a public official is not going to like do something off of elections. It was the most naive thing I've ever thought.
Right.
It's incredibly naive of me to be like, politicians wouldn't do that. They're good people.
Yeah.
Like they're
right.
people who you wouldn't just do that to, get yourself elected. Like that was that for me personally, I'm only speaking for myself. That was an incredibly naive point of view that I carried with me for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been disabused of that notion at this point in my life. But
I do want to point out too that this is the frustrating part about not having the trial transcripts. So in the chat we have, I just lost it. Somebody in the chat, wherever I can find it, said that every witness at trial described. How did I lose that? It said every witness at trial described Bridge Guy as being taller than Richard Allen. I don't know if that's true because I haven't seen the trial. And then somebody else said, nope, not every witness said he was taller than the older, she said. So I don't know. Like right here within our chat, these are two people obviously that are pretty deeply into the case. Oh, that was Crystal said every single witness at trial described Bridge Guy as much taller than Richard Allen. So that's one perspective on what happened at trial. And underneath that, we have some lady said he was regular to short man. So I don't know, but I do know none of them said that it was Richard Allen. But it sounds like if she said one lady did, so it sounds like several of them said he was taller. I don't know. I just want to put out there that this is why there's a lot of confusion because we don't have the freaking trial transcripts.
Right. Robert, just shouting you out. I think we've covered everything. You were asking about the significance of the van and the 12 minutes and so we kind of expressed our opinion on that. Expressed our opinion. You asked about the headphones. We addressed that. And then we addressed your question about what we think about the jailhouse informant. So hopefully that was helpful. Kate kind of said the same thing that I said, that Maria and Miranda, hopefully I'm saying your name right, but Kate H, was kind of saying the same thing. Like, what is happening, that if there's all these third party people, like, why would the police just not pursue them? Why focus so much on this other person that came into the picture later? That should be really troubling, and regardless of, like, kind of where you land on it, it's
Yeah.
I
I
don't know.
really think that innocent or guilty, I really think that what I said earlier, that I think they were just being very cautious and they wanted to have a lock set, open and shut case, and they didn't get it, and they just got to a point where maybe it was the election or whatever it was, where they said, like, we got to do this is the best we got. Let's go for it.
Yeah. And then Liz, well, we can end on you, because I do think that there's something to be said for this. Liz says, can you explain why a judge would ever decide that third-party culprit evidence shouldn't be allowed? It seems to me more often than not, even though we've also seen that juries could be much more likely to convict if they're left asking the question, if not him, then who? What reasons could justify such a decision despite the possible unfair prejudice against a defendant that it could cause? And my point of view on that, Liz, is that, like, I understand why you're asking, but that does feel like a slippery slope. I mean, it is not cool to just be able to throw a random innocent person under the bus. I have ethical quandaries and discomfort around us throwing around names like Ron Logan without knowing. I'm not helping his reputation at all by talking about him without knowing the man, and just going off of official documents. I wouldn't want someone to toss around my dad's name like we and were, other people who I think are even less responsible, but I know that's, again, subjective. Um, I don't want someone to be able to just throw my dad up there as a subject because he's a white male who may or may not fit the build, because a defense attorney is just trying to figure something else out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, so there has to be a standard. The problem is that it feels like the standard's very subjective, and I think that's something that's been spoken about not just by Bob Motta, but by other people who are um, not necessarily attached to this case in particular at all. I've heard it a lot of the time that I've been interested in true crime, is just like, wow, so the judge is just this person who gets to kind of go, what do I think?
Yeah.
And
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 it is subjective, and is exactly what Janet just described is the reason why, right? You can't just go out and start accusing people. So generally the standard is supposed to be, in most states, like, you can't come up here and start accusing somebody else of doing this in front of the jury unless you have compelling evidence that they were actually involved in the crime. Like, you have to show a judge in those pretrial hearings that because of this and this is a legitimate alternate suspect, and we think that the jury deserves to hear it. And then it comes down to the judge about whether they do it or not. There's something that I forgot about until people are just talking about in the chat before we wrap this up real quick. It is interesting. So that so it's the FBI who filed the probable cause affidavit, who had investigated Ron Logan, and the local police kicked the FBI off the case before arresting Richard Allen.
as far as we understand it, I mean, we haven't seen a document that's like, we kick you off,
It was, well,
right?
kicking
Because
off
the
may not be the right
FBI did not
word,
want
but
to
they,
testify at the,
prior to it, they were removed from the case. And I remember this from back then,
right.
that the FBI was in whatever capacity they were removed from the case. The way I've heard it phrased is that they were, basically the locals said, "This is our jurisdiction. We don't want your help anymore."
Right.
And then they went and arrested Richard Allen. So
I would love a person who's, like, very firmly convinced, again, because I am not convinced in either direction at all. I would love for somebody who has that true knowledge, who can share that documentation. Like, I would love to see a great reason why that happened. Like, I'm totally open to it. Like, I don't know what
yeah.
I don't know. There might be, like, a great reason for it. I just don't know what it is. And that's the kind of thing that, like, again, no case is perfect. I totally get that. I would just love to have those answers. And maybe they're out there, and I'm just not looking hard enough.
So
And,
Susan says
that's
that
on
it
me.
was, and that's what I remember, right? It was Carter, the lead investigator, said it at a press conference that they've stopped. They declined to have any more help from the FBI, and that was before they got the tip about Richard Allen. So I
Wasn't the
don't know.
tip just a woman, and I could be wrong, but I thought the tip was just a woman who was like, "I saw that he was a per he I saw that he put himself on the bridge." and then that wasn't, and then and then they hadn't talked to him enough or something. I don't remember it being someone that's like, "Hey, I think it could be this person. This person
Yeah, I
is
don't
very
remember.
suspicious."
It was
I
nothing
thought it
super
was like,
significant as far as what the nature of the tip was, but all of this is just food for thought. I just want like this is one of those all the stuff, the rabbit holes with Ron Logan I was going through all day, looking through their probable cause affidavit and look at the interviews of people that knew him and stuff like that. I was like I could just write an episode about this. But I hope that our goal is to have an objective to both sided discussion. So you guys, I wanted to make sure that for absolute certainty that we covered the state's response. I did see in the chat that it sounds like must have been today, or I don't know when it was, but the defense has now filed a reply to the state's reply. So there's more information coming out. We'll see if we get back into that stuff later. But the big thing is like I just want to be objective. I just don't want us to miss something. Like if someone can come to me, if someone can, email me or send me a message and say Ron Logan was cleared because of this, and I'm like, okay, well then all this, because everything we're talking about with him, keep in mind, it's all circumstantial as well, right? It's
"Oh,
to me,
totally."
yeah. I mean, to me, it seemed like if I had to pick, if I didn't know any names or anything, and I've got the case of this guy over here who's lied about his alibi and tried to get somebody to lie for him, and all the things we talked about with Ron Logan, if I had that compared to what they had on Richard Allen prior pre-confessions, I would feel like the Ron Logan one is a stronger circumstantial case than what's for Richard Allen. But then you have to contend with the confessions. But the point is, we're trying to get all the information out there. We're trying to be fair about all of this, and I want to for no other reason, because one thing that I have a lot of pride in our audiences for is that you all are critical thinkers, you all are objective, you all try to avoid bias. I just don't want to see all of us go into that trap, because I mean there is a potential that Richard Allen was wrongfully convicted, and that justice wasn't served in this case. Not saying that it is, but that's why we do what we do. That's why Bob Mata does what he does. That's why the murder sheets do what they do, is trying to be aware, to bring awareness, to try to get people engaged, to try to make an impact from the outside, to try to fix the things that are wrong with the system on the inside. So know that that's the only place that we're coming from. We just want to see justice served. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. In 2 days on Sunday, we're going to have the fellas from the Somewhere in the Pines. Did I say that right? Okay.
Yep.
And coming up in 2 days on Sunday, we're going to have the fellows from Somewhere in the Pines on the podcast. We're going to be interviewing them about their work, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys. All right, we're going to stop on
That
the
sucks
record.
that Zap wasn't on for this.
Can you imagine how long it would be?
I know, it's
You and
true.
me went an hour and 20 minutes. That's
I don't know.
like,
Maybe he would have kept us. Maybe he would have policed us better and just like kept it under control. I don't know. He might have.
maybe he would have been the adult in the room.
He might have been the adult in the room. The other thing I was going to quickly say, and it's fine to not have said it then, but I just wish people would remember. Like again, you cite Jim Clemente as like a huge, huge mentor for you. He is like very often very pro guilty, or is very, he's
Yeah,
gonna be
in
very
this case, he is.
so that's just what's funny to me, is like this idea that there's just, and then we all love Josh Hallmark and what he's doing, and no one's saying that Israel Keys wasn't guilty and that he wasn't a killer, and like there's plenty of people that cross over into the like, these people are terrible people, or these people did terrible things, and then maybe these people didn't do them. I don't know. It just makes me sad that it's like, again, it's not binary. It's not binary. Like
Well,
it's just not
this is
binary.
my
It makes me
wish,
sad.
right? When someone disagrees, so like this last episode we did, I wish people could come and say, that was interesting. But I disagree with you because of this. Instead of you're a fucking idiot, you're biased, you don't agree with me, so you're the stupidest person in the world, and you're not looking. It's like none of that's necessary. Like, why can't we have like above kindergarten level conversations and just be like, I always, as I tell my students when they start bickering about stuff, and my kids, I always tell them, your response should always be, I disagree because,
Right.
and then support your argument with evidence. Like that's all. You don't need to personally attack people to have a conversation, and that's what
Well, I
gets
know,
frustrating.
but just bear in mind that if somebody who listened to your reply brief and heard what you said about the prosecutors,
Oh yeah, fuck that.
they But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if they're predisposed to think that that was inappropriate and disrespectful of you, then they're coming in already not going to be reasonable because they think you're not reasonable. And that's what we keep doing. And I keep doing it too, is that I have an idea of someone I think is, is not being honorable about something. And so I sort of throw that away, that person away. I'm like, well, I don't have to be respectful about them because I've seen them be disrespectful to other people. And then I think it just perpetuates. Right? I mean,
Right.
so if someone is
I
like,
like
you
to
called
think
them trash, therefore I don't have to say anything to you except that you're trash because I know that you're biased or whatever.
Yeah. I like to think that I try while I did definitely probably call some names in that.
It was pretty intense. That's the
But
most intense I've ever heard you be about anything.
right. But I also feel like I maintained throughout the entire thing, I disagree because it was like bringing receipt, and it was like
Oh
when
no,
I
you
was
brought
getting
the receipts. You
yeah,
brought
when
the
it was like
receipts.
getting when I was getting angry was not because I disagreed with their opinion. When I was getting angry was because you
They
literally told 100,000 people
I know.
that this document said this, and that's
I
not what it
know. I
fucking
know.
says.
I
But yeah,
know.
you're right. You're right though.
It's just
Uh,
hard.
okay, I gotta go to bed. It's
I know. Okay, I
9:37.
know.
It's way past my bedtime. You probably want to eat dinner or something. Eat some
Probably.
gluten-free cake or whatever you got going on in there.
To a girl, I feel the same. I think we talked about that a few months ago, even maybe, but that I was like, oh, this is, I mean, again, people are coming at this with, I have less information than X and X has less information than me. Like I said, I think one thing I did like, and I've let you go because you're in charge of this, Bob, is I like that Francie was like, I'm sure this guy is guilty, but I'm real worried about the choices that this judge is making. That seemed
Yeah,
that's like, okay,
reasonable.
there
Yeah.
you go. Like, somebody who's on quote unquote both sides is
Yep.
like, this is worrisome. Like
Mhm.
that tracks for me, you know?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Like
Anyway,
you can support somebody and support an opinion, but also acknowledge when the other side is making a mistake. Like that's the whole thing. Like the political arguments, everything is like
yeah,
the trap everybody falls down in every argument, whether it's politics or the criminal justice or a court case, whatever the hell it is there's this team and this team. And since I support this team, everything that team does is wrong.
right.
Like my team is obviously the good guy and they're the bad guy and they can never do anything right. And it just all becomes a bunch of disingenuous nonsense.
Yeah. Let's stay
But
open, everybody. Let's stay open and let's
oh, I
cross
thought
the
you were
aisle.
saying let's stay open, like keep the stream open. I'm like, no,
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 no, no,
no,
no.
no, no, no,
Let's
no,
just
I'm
try to
done.
keep critical thinking. I think that's really good.
Yep.
I
Okay.
appreciate you. I love you.
Love you too. Appreciate
Love you
you.
guys. Thanks for coming and showing up and talking about the stuff with us. It really gets me going in a good way.
Yeah.
Keeps me thinking.
Appreciate you guys.
Keeps us engaged.
Make sure you tell Zach to fuck off for not saying happy birthday.
He gave up on me.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you next week or probably,
Okay.
I'm sure before then.
All right.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
guys.